conceptual perspective. People talk about a desire to be successful. All of the elements they think. Intelligence.
Hello, everybody. Dr. Rick Wallace here, dropping in on you to talk about a subject that I have been approached on so many times I can't even attempt to give you a number. I don't talk about it in the way that I'm going to kind of engage it today that often. Those who have followed me for any amount of time know that I have an immense passion for restoring Black love, bringing the Black family back to the forefront. And there's a reason for that. And I'll get to that as we enter off into this discussion. But I'm always asked, some people do it because of my fourth book, which is When Your House Is Not a Home, which addresses conflict in the home, primarily from some principles that are basically biblical, but also from just basic understanding of the nature of men and the nature of women and how they have to be in order to coexist together because they're distinctively different. And with so many pushes in the world to try to blur the lines of the distinctions between men and women, that creates a level of conflict that at one point in time didn't exist, that makes relationships more volatile than they already are. And trust me, because of the massive elements and components that exist in one personality, merging two personalities over a long term in a consistent environment creates volatility when you don't know how to manage it. And one of the mechanisms in learning how to manage it is the ability to extract yourself out of a subjective mindset. In other words, you got to stop being selfish. Any type of narcissistic or self-centeredness that you have, narcissistic behavior and self-centeredness that you have is going to create a more volatile situation in a relationship, because a relationship is give and take. A relationship is knowing when to make a demand and when to meet a demand and all of the things in between. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start out by giving you a look into my life and, telling you why I feel that, I'm able to talk on this. And I'm able to talk on it from a unique perspective because I'm not the person who's had this huge, long 30-year marriage and never failed. I'm the person that failed twice, not even counting all of the unofficial relationships, and just got to a point nearly 20 years ago where I said, I'm not going to do it again. I'm not going to give up on marriage, but I'm not going to fail at it again. So I'm not going to just jump into it. I took the first two marriages right out the box. Out the house into marriage, out that marriage, pretty much into another one. And it, I got leveled. And so it's easy to point fingers, and no one has ever heard me sit up and talk about my exes. And I will not. I will never, ever throw them under the bus. I will never sit up and say anything about them, whether they say something about me or not. It's just where I stand. And I've always been that way, to the frustration of some people that I know that know some backstories. But that's not where I've been, and that's not where I'm at, especially when you have, although the kids are grown, you still have kids together. My thing is, I'll take the blows. Whatever it is I am. I'm not going to go and try to defend myself about what's been said about me. It is what it is. But that failing led to my understanding and seeking. And something I teach people who come to me, and predominantly women, but men as well, when they come to me and they got several failed relationships, I teach them what I learned. See, it was easy for me to point the finger because I made the initial choice to walk out on both of those relationships because I felt like I had taken it as far as I could and it wasn't anything there. But it was easy for me to sit up and point the finger. This happened, that happened, and that happened. But something that I was able to sit down when I really started saying, I can't fail at this again. because it's becoming a joke, and I take it too seriously. I was reared by my great grandparents, and they were married for 40 something years before my before my grandfather passed away. Now, what I didn't take into consideration when I was using them as my model is that they were both each other's third. And there's a lesson in that I didn't get, because all I saw when I was born, they were together. They had reared my grandmother. They actually my great grandparents. They had reared my grandmother and her siblings, reared my grandmother's oldest child, which was my mother, and then had adopted me. And so all I knew was marriage by them, and how well they managed that. And I didn't take into consideration a lot of things. And I know I'm gonna get to the thing that everybody wants to talk about, this perpetual engagement thing, and why that's a problem and how to deal with it. I want to kind of the foundation of why I wrote When Your House Is Not a Home. Because when you talk about the high divorce rate of something that's supposed to be lifelong, you got to ask, why is the rate so high? And is there something that can be done about it? And I think that we enter into these relationships with faulty ideas and expectations. Disappointed expectations will lead to separation faster than anything else. Now, the statistics show that the #1 cause of divorce is finances. But I know people who have made it through some of the toughest financial times and had, decade-long relationships. But when there's nothing to solidify everything, it amplifies everything that's wrong. And so financial problems is a high stressor. And when you can't get on the same page with it, and you can't be a person that someone looks at and depends, but also one of the reasons are these faulty ideas and paradigms surrounding finance and how things are set up in the home and what can be expected financially. But anyway, the first thing that I came up with that really settled me down and really made me focus on me more than trying to pick the right woman was I was the only common denominator in my failed relationships. And that's something I tell everybody that comes to me in playing the victim role. That guy did that to me, this guy did this to me, this guy did this guy, or this woman did this woman did this. I'm so tired of women. Well, hold on a second. Let's see. Unless all these women or all these men got together years and years and years ago and say, you know what, we're going to team up and just make their life a living hell for the next 15 or 20 years, you got some culpability in it. And that's what we don't want to look at. We don't want to look at the culpability we have. The other thing we don't want to look at is we tend to attract people who are on the same frequency that we're on. They may not be doing or going through or at where we're at exactly. While they may not have been molested and you were molested, they were abused or they were abandoned. And there's a brokenness and there's a low frequency. There's this trauma that you have in common that has impacted you that you haven't healed from. And so you found each other because you're operating on the same frequency. Frequent energy frequencies resonate. Energy resonates with like energy. So you're attracting people. That's one of the things that I talk about a lot. That's something that my wife and I talked about long before we got married, but long before we ever expressed openly that we were interested in one another, although I think we both knew we were operating in a professional capacity, and so we kept it above board and professional, but we talked about the need for healing before entering into relationships. When I wrote When Your House Is Not a Home, I led in with the importance of understanding that marriage is not the ground on which you seek someone to help you heal. Marriage is not the place you go to heal all of your past ills. Marriage is not the place to go to be made whole. Marriage is where two people come together, each being their own individual entity and being whole, and they come together and they merge this energy that each one carries and create a synergy, which gives them greater power to perform things that advance their values, their interests, their principles, and their ideas, normally through the rearing of their progeny. They create these progeny, these offspring, and then they teach them their values, they teach them their principles. That's why it's so important to be equally connected to people who have the same values and interests, because the conflict in when you don't have the same values and interests and principles creates the orifice through which discontent comes in and causes problems. So what I teach people is what I had to learn. Rick, before you can sit up and have a good marriage, you're going to have to work on you. You're going to have to answer some real hard questions. One of the questions is, why is it that you can't be by yourself? Why is it that you're out of one relationship and immediately into another, and you fill the gaps with casual relationships? And I had to deal with that. That was a major thing for me. And so before I got with my wife, I had to go through a period of years where I wasn't with anyone. And that was not what I was used to. I always used to having somebody around me, but I never asked myself why. So I had to deal with that. I had to deal with that. I had to come to grips with the fact that while I could present a good image, I still was broken. I wasn't whole. And I had some issues that I needed to deal with. I had some issues from a parenting perspective from both my mother and my father that I had not confronted. And I'm not going to get into detail here, but I had not confronted. And so while I had a very loving environment that I grew up in, my great-grandparents were awesome, but it didn't take away the questions that I had. It didn't take away the hurt and the pain, the feelings of abandonment, and so many other things that I had not dealt with. The things I was trying to cover up with relationships that were shallow, relationships that were not well thought out, relationships that didn't align. And the thing is, what you have to realize is it doesn't take a bad person to end up in a bad relationship. And that's another thing. We look at people and say, they're a great person, but they may not be great for you. And so what we do is we think that if it's a good person, it's a good relationship. No, you get good people in situations and it becomes bad situations fast. You got to understand who you're dealing with. You got to understand where they're at. You got to understand where you're at. You have to have some clear expectations of how things are going to take place in the relationship. And you've got to be prepared for growth. Here's where a lot of other relationships end up faulty, is in the sense that you're growing. When you get married, especially early, like in your early 20s, your mid 20s, you get early, you're still growing. You're still in the first phase of adulthood. You haven't even truly really discovered who you are. You're in the stage of ambition. So you may meet someone and they're ambitious like you, and they're about getting that, and they're on their grind, and you're on your grind, and y'all can really feel each other, y'all connecting, but you're also growing and you're evolving, and the chance of you growing and evolving at the same pace and in the same direction aren't actually that good. So you got to get understanding at that age of what's going to happen as you evolve. And so what you try to do is not so much look at where you're at right now in those young ages, but where do you think you want to end up in 40 years from now? Now, if you're in the same spot 40 years from now in your mind, the chances of you getting there together are increased. But if you're just in the same place now, but where you're heading is two different directions, the chances are you're not going to get there together, because going in two different directions, or one person is going to have to give up what they're growing for and what they're passionate about in the direction they're headed in to support and get behind the other. And then now you're dealing with resentment. And so all of these things creep into relationships. And so I had to learn this. And so when I'm talking to you, I'm not talking to you because I got it all right. I'm talking to you because I got it so terribly wrong. I had to step back and actually dig into it. And so that leads me to this other thing that I get. This is the biggest question. What should I do when I've been with a person for 4 years and 5 years? And, I either have not even been asked to get married, or they asked me to get married and it's been 4 or 5 years. Well, I'm going to give you the short answers up front. First of all, you have to be very clear in your communication of what you're looking for when you meet someone. The idea of, I'm just going to be cool with it for now and hopefully I can convince them later, that's not a good thing. I'm just going to be cool with it now and hopefully I can change them later, not a good look. I see that so often where you're looking at somebody and they're not what you want them to be, but there are certain things about them that you absolutely adore. And so you think, well, I'm just going to chill with it and eventually it'll work itself out. If that person is telling you, I'm not about a serious relationship, they're not about a serious relationship. And you can't be sure when or if they will ever be about a serious relationship. And so you've got to sit up and decide, this is not the person for me. If I'm seriously about a relationship, you need to talk to a person And you need to ask them some serious questions. I mean, right up front. I know that's not the way we do things. Now it's about feeling things out and seeing what's going on. You look up and you are literally 6 months into a relationship and then decide this is not for me, or they decide it's not for them and don't realize what's happened. Let me explain something to you about dating. Here's how dating goes. And this is why I kind of blew my wife's mind when I told her I'm not into dating. I'm not going to date. I'm going to observe my potential mate at a distance until I can really look at her character. Because I don't care how well you get to know someone. It's the commitment that's going to make the relationship work. It's not how well you know them. It's whether you understand covenant. It's whether you understand contract. It's whether you understand commitment. Because you can know somebody and they're evolving. They're not going to be that person next year. So what keeps you in the relationship? It's not how they make me feel. Why? Because I'll be honest with you, sometimes that you're going to be with your significant other and you can't stand them. You love them, but you can't stand them. So what keeps you in the relationship? Commitment, covenant, understanding that it's not just about how I feel, it's about the honor of honoring vows and making it work. Now, I'm not saying stay with someone who disrespects you, mistreats you, beats you, or cheats on you, or things that are deal breakers. The deal breakers need to be discussed up front as well. I'm not talking about people who engage in deal breakers. I'm talking about people who are really trying and putting forth the effort and being human. You got to understand that sometimes I'm just not in the mood. You got to understand sometimes she's just not in the mood. You've got to understand that it's going to take, the two of us working through this, pushing through this and putting in the work. See, people don't want to put in the work. They want to feel good, but they don't want to put in the work. They want to enjoy the hallelujah honeymoon moments, but they don't want to put in the work. And the thing is, the honeymoon doesn't have to end. The honeymoon is a feeling. The honeymoon is a stage where anything, bounces off because you're just happy to be with this person. And then all of a sudden, there's around about the 3-month mark, 6-month mark, somewhere up in there, it starts to get where you're starting to feel things now. They aren't so adorable anymore. You're starting to see they do some things that kind of get under your skin. Well, the thing is, the honeymoon can be recreated over and over again by trying to grow together, by doing different things, by putting in an effort to not be stagnant and repeat the same cycle of when we get up in the morning, this is what we do. When we see each other during the day, this is what we do. We see each other at night, this is how we act. When we get to the weekend, this is pretty much what we do every weekend. Well, yeah, the more monotonous that it becomes, the more stagnant that it becomes, the less there is to look forward to. But when there's constant growth, when there's always something that's going to pop up that you've never done before, because both of you are thinking about ways to keep it alive, there's always something to look forward to. Even when things aren't going well, there's something to look forward to because there's always those moments, and you got to create those. But when it comes down to this whole idea of engagement, I'm gonna give you the front end answer to that, and then I'll talk about it briefly. Look, you got to know what you want, and here's my take on it, and it's my take, and my take comes from interviewing a lot of married couples, from people who got divorced to people who stayed married 40, 50 years. And I've done it with different religions, different ethnic groups. I mean, I took a lot of time, 12 years before I wrote the book. I've never put that much research into a book before I started writing it. I mean, I just wanted to know what's the difference. And one of the funniest things happened in compiling my research for When Your House Is Not a Home is that I discovered that the people I talked to who spent the shortest amount of time before they committed to marriage lasted longer. Now, that wasn't always the case. There was exceptions on both ends. But what I found is the longer it took people to commit, the shorter the relationship. See, it's not about how much you know a person. It's about understanding commitment. And the longer it takes you to get committed to something, there's an issue with commitment. And so, number one is, I have two different groups that I divide non-committals up into. The first one is the one that's not even going to ask to get married, or the one that's going, when asked to get married, is going to immediately come up with a reason why it's not a good time. That's the first one. We're not even going to say we engaged. We just in whatever you want to call it. And the problem with these type of relationships, whether it's dating, whether it's a one-on-one and we serious, we saying we're boyfriend and girlfriend, here's the thing. After the first date is a filler. That's just going out with somebody because there's something about them that makes them uh, uh, something about them that makes them. Hold on, let me know how I do it. My son just pulled me. Son's bringing over the grandson, and shoot, it's just me. Okay, look like I'm babysitting. Okay, so I'm going to speed this up. Look, but then the second date, it could be either first date went really well, or it was just something about that person that even though the first date didn't go well, you got to give it at least one more shot, right? But if you enter the third and fourth date, there's something you're feeling about that person, and you're already starting to develop an emotional attachment to that person. And so for every day that you spend with that person after that, talking to them on the phone, texting them, going out to eat, spending time together, you are developing an emotional attachment, but there's no commitment. So that means that that person at any time in the future, 6 months down the road, can sit up and say, we're just dating. You know what? It's been great. I've enjoyed it. It's awesome, but I'm not feeling it anymore and I'm out. It's nothing you can hold them to. It's nothing you can sit up and say, but we're in a commitment and hold them to. There's nothing that says they are even something of yours that you have claim to. And they can walk away, but here's the problem. They take a piece of you with them because you've invested in them. You've invested in them, if nothing else, emotionally. And probably sexually, which means spiritually. You've invested in them in that way. So now you're in a situation where you've got a problem. So I have a major issue with this ongoing dating thing. I have a major issue with that. So what I'm getting into now is, you guys hold a second. She'll be back in a little bit. So yeah, Sierra's up there. But so what happens is I have a problem with the whole just dating for the sake of dating, because it creates attachments, it creates bonds. And when those bonds have nothing to hold people in place, people end up getting hurt. They'll say, I'm good, but you don't spend 6 months with a person and not have an attachment. I don't care what you're calling it. It's an attachment growing. But anyway, what happens? You've got the non-committals that won't even get married. So while they are obvious, the ones I have a problem with are people who say, let's get married, but then it's 2 and 3 and 4 years down the line. And what it really amounts to is them using an engagement ring as a placeholder. The engagement ring says, I'm not willing to commit to you. And I'm talking about both ends, whether you're wearing the engagement ring or whether you gave the engagement ring. It's a placeholder. It says, because of this thing right here, you're off the market. I'm not totally committed. So you're not totally committed. I don't care how engaged you are, how much boyfriend, girlfriend you are. It's not a committed relationship until there's something official. Now, I'm not talking necessarily about the legality of it in the sense of a license. Now, the license gives some legal rights. You get to, if something happens medically, you get to make decisions. If something happens financially, you get to make decisions. It gives access in a legal sense. But I'm talking more about emotional. I'm talking about there's something about being acknowledged to others as being that committed. It immediately says that, I'm off the market, and if I'm trying to pretend like I'm on the market, then I have moral issues, and I'm not somebody you should be messing with. And so it immediately sends a message, and it also has a powerful psychological impact to the person that's the other side of the commitment. The commitment says, I love you enough to spend the rest of my life with you. And if you really stop and think about that at the depths of what it really means, it's powerful. It's something that shouldn't be taken lightly. It's something that should be definitely examined and studied. But here's my thing about engagement. Once a person says, I want to marry you, there's no reason to wait other than to plan the wedding. And I've seen some pretty extravagant weddings that took a lot of time to plan, and they were still paying for the wedding while they were paying for the divorce. And so make it be more about the marriage than it is about the wedding. Now, that again is my personal perspective of it. Make it be more about the marriage than the wedding. But here's the thing. it should take, to me, no more than a year at most from the day a person says we're engaged to the day they get married. Anything other than that is procrastination. It does, if when I ask you to marry me, let me explain what I mean by that. When I ask you to marry, I'm telling you at that moment, I know that you are the person I want to spend the rest of my life with. What else is there to know? No, how much more I get to, if I don't know you enough, if that's the excuse I'm using, then I don't need to ask you to marry me. If I know you enough to say I want to spend my life, what else is there? And the thing is, well, I want to be able to do this. I want to be able, another issue that's always thrown up, I want to be financially correct. The truth of the matter is, while there's a lot of traditional uh, paradigms about the provider and who does what, the truth of the matter is, especially if you're Black in America, is that for the vast majority of people, it takes two incomes. It also takes someone knowing and believing in you to really push you to your potential as a provider. If you want to go the traditional route, you're going to go further with somebody that underwrites you. I'm telling you from experience, it's a difference in coming home and having putting in a hard day's work and being in my own place by myself, and coming home having put in a hard day's work, and I'm looking in the eyes of a woman that believes in me, a woman that loves me, a woman that supports me, a woman that says, I know we're going to be better next year than we are this year, a woman that's saying, I see us climbing, I see us rising, I see the progress. There's a difference in having that's spoken into you. That's a part of the natural makeup of a man. No one can affirm a man's masculinity better than a woman he loves. And she does it in two ways. And that's why we've really got to protect ourselves. She does it in two ways. She does it verbally, when she speaks into him, when she tells him she believes in him, when she tells him she trusts him, when she tells him she can see greatness in him, that affirms it. And just the fact that she surrenders her body is another affirmation of her masculinity. Now, we've skewed that so much in this social culture that has marginalized the power of both of those mechanisms in the building of a man. And that's one of the issues we have in the Black community, is that we don't know how to build men and we don't know how to hold and cover women. And so what happens is we have everybody looking out for themselves. And that's the worst place to be when you're in a marriage, is looking out for yourselves. Marriage is not the place where you go to get stuff. Marriage is the place that's going to teach you marriage is going to be the ultimate training ground for sacrifice. Marriage is the ultimate training ground of how to put yourself aside and be something bigger for the other people that you care about. See, there's no other place that will challenge you to step out of yourself, get out of your ego, get out of your centricity, your self-centeredness, and focus on someone else. When we go into marriage, think about it. When you hear somebody talking about they met somebody and they thinking about getting married. Oh, girl, he do this. He can do. Oh, girl, he can do this. Oh, girl, he can do this. He can do this. He can do this. He can do this. And he's going, man, and she can cook, and man, she can throw down here, and she can do this. And nobody's talking about what they bring to the table. Nobody's talking about how they're going to make the other person's life better, what they have to offer, because everybody's trained in this culture to take. And the marriage, when you keep taking and both people are just taking, it becomes a fight of who's going to get something. Oh Lord, all these kids coming in at the same time. Yeah, I need to hurry get out because the kids are rolling in. But look, well, I wasn't expecting the sun to come in like that right doing this. But anyway, everything's going on. I'm not going to even get up again. Y'all guys are just going to deal with the funny lighting. It's that time of the day. But anyway, so my whole thing is the building up of the family nucleus. The family nucleus, how we see it, and obviously we're in a world right now where the absence of a number of men, it's estimated that 1.5 million Black men are missing, and there's this big gap. There's about 83 Black men for every 100 Black women, so that creates this gap. And so we've got to figure out what we are going to do about that. So the conventional idea of the family nucleus is something we've got to look at. What my thing is extended family thinking, and what I mean by that is outside of the idea of polygamy and polyamory, it is the idea of saying, okay, there's this woman over here and she's trying to raise these kids and she doesn't have a man. I have a family. I'm happy and I'm monogamous in my relationship, but I'm going to get with my wife and we're going to find a way to support her in the best way possible. If she's got young male children, I'm going to go pick them up and I'm going to spend time with them. I'm going to let them hang out with me and my little mans. And we're going to do some things like that. I'm going to let the wife spend some time with her and sister and be with her. We've got to love one another. We've got to come back. I mean, God, dog, everybody's pulling up. What in the world is happening? Are you freaking kidding me? This dude shows up and delivers something to my door every freaking day. Look, I'm gonna have to get off of here because hold on, no, I'm not. God, damn. I got to figure it out now. You got dead right there in my office. Oh, man, I know not to do this again. I know, again, I apologize, but hey, it happens. I know not to do it during this time of the day. Uh, I mean, I'm wondering what's next. Somebody else gonna show up. But but ultimately, those are some of the things that we have to look at. It's easy to talk about a bunch of things, but we got to take it serious. Our families is where we inculcate our values into the youth. And when you don't have a complete family structure, there are these gaps of things that need to be taught to young children so that they can grow up whole, so they can grow up full and have an anticipation of being able to live their lives autonomously and live their lives with force. Our children grow up empty, lacking, wondering, uh, suffering self-images, suffering self-esteem, suffering self-confidence, and it's because they're not growing up in whole families, and it's because we have marginalized the importance of it. We have bought into these propagandized messages of how awful the other side of the spectrum is. Now there's this infighting between men and women. And don't get me wrong, there are some things that we definitely need to improve on. I'm constantly on men and challenging men about things we need to be better at. And I hold women accountable for some of the things that they're doing. But at the same point in time, there are a bunch of us out there that are doing the best we possibly can. And that's never going to be put out in the open. That's never going to be played out on mainstream media. And so we're constantly being bombarded with the most negative and disruptive images of who we are constantly, which makes it difficult for us to trust one another, difficult for us to get along, difficult for us to commit to anything long term. So we're in and out, in and out, in and out, and we're even now justifying that without looking at the repercussions. Nobody wants to talk about any type of commitment. Nobody wants to talk because everybody just wants to do what they want to do. But see, you can say that whole live and let live thing doesn't work in a social culture. A social culture, everybody's conditioned and trained and socialized into the culture in a manner that says this is going to be your responsibility in the culture. This is how you carry yourself in the culture. This is what you're going to produce over the course of your life. And it's going to be for the benefit of more than just yourself. It's not just about you. The culture is bigger than you. The collective is bigger than you. The race is bigger than you. And we don't do that. It's everybody. As long as I'm getting what I want out of it, it doesn't matter what's going on. I don't care if I'm spending and that's hurting the family. I don't care if I'm spending that's hurting the community. I don't care. I just want what I want. If you don't like, go get what you want. But that's not how you operate. That's not a social perspective. That's a very individualized perspective, and it doesn't serve the culture well. And it weakens you as an individual because you're only as strong as the culture that supports you and backs you. So in answering the whole thing about engagement is the point where you tell a person, hey, let's spend the rest of our life together. Everything after that is planning the wedding and getting married. The 4 and 5 year engagement thing, now you're playing the engagement as a placeholder. That's a way of saying stay away from this person. They're mine, but they're not really. And we do this way too often. And, you know, the thing is, you know, the one thing I can say, I didn't do the whole long engagement thing. That was never my issue. My issue was I was too anxious to move in. I didn't see what was on the other side, because all I saw was what was in front of me. I wanted to be married. You know, that's what I grew up. I grew up in the house with marriage, and that's all I wanted. I wanted someone I can wake up to every day. Now, there was a lot of other stuff that went on because it wasn't always that way, but that was always my intent. But what am I getting at? I'm getting at this. While we can be very self-serving and we can, in our own way, you know, decide I'm just going to live for me, it's not serving the collective well. It's not serving our significant others well. That should be a level of commitment that says this thing, marriage, is bigger than me. That marriage is going to make me a better person, but I'm going to have to be willing to invest in it. I'm going to have to be willing to put it above myself to get the most out of it. And that's where a lot of people aren't. Most people are going into marriage for what they can get, and they haven't given a whole lot of consideration to what they're going to give. And I wish I could tell you I had all the answers. I'm still learning. But I entered into this marriage with an understanding that it was going to be work, and that it wasn't about how happy I was going to be every day. It was about what I was willing to do to make their life better, and to trust that every time I invested in them, they would reciprocate the love in their own way. And so it doesn't always come in the way that I think it should, but it comes. There's a constant reminder of their love for me. There's a constant reminder of their respect for me. There's a constant reminder of how much they appreciate me. And I take it to heart. And here's the thing though, and I'm gonna leave it at this. Here's the thing that both of us know that I never gave consideration to before I started this research. And that thing that I now know is, while I love my wife and I want to give her every possible thing that she wants and all of that, the one thing I know is there's nothing I can give her that can make her happy. She's responsible for her happiness. I'm responsible for mine. Now, I'm responsible for respecting her. I'm responsible for covering her. I'm responsible for protecting her. And the other things that we've agreed on in this marriage, I'm responsible for that. But her happiness is something that she has to do on her own. And so I have to be able to do that. And so that's extremely important that we be able to do and understand that. So, you know, with that being said, that's something that I just thought, you know, I will share with you guys. You can take it and do what you want to do with it. But ultimately, hey, it is what it is. I'm going to get off of here because everybody's doing everybody right now. And I'm trying to be understanding, but, you know, hey, it is what it is. I should have did this earlier or waited till later, but it is what it is. Hopefully, I touched on something that helps. You know, for those of you who know what I'm doing, there's an opportunity to always support the Black Man Lead Rite of Passage Initiative, which is extremely important. That's where we are actually socializing young Black males so they do grow up and be strong Black men who understand the importance of respecting, loving, and protecting Black women. You can support that. You can also get your copy of Born in Captivity, The Psychopathology as a Legacy of Slavery. That link is in there as well. So I'm going to sign off, and I'm going to get to what's going on around here, cluck some heads and whatever, because everybody just showing out today. You know, it is what it is. I'm going to go, actually what I'm about to do is go get my grandson. But anyway, with that being said, I absolutely love you guys. You guys keep your head up, stay focused, as I always say. Live your life on full so that you can die on E. With that being said, I'm out of here. Peace. I'm out.
Here I come, ready or not. Frank Ocean made this record hot.
From a conceptual
Jay sounded better than Jay.
perspective, people talk
Real
about
talk,
it as
I ain't throwing
successful.
shots. Careful who you